Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Because Football podcast. This is your host, Coach Andrew. Today, we have a fantastic guest. We have Harry Varley of Leeds, England. Harry is currently calling to us from Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Central Africa. Harry's currently the full-time scout and the head scout of Africa for Gent Football Club of Belgium. Gent, you may know as a club that's developed Jonathan David. They've won a national title in Belgium and spent 12 of the last 13 seasons in qualification for European football. Over Harry's career, he's coached in 4 different continents for everything from working in NGOs and nonprofits and service organizations, using the game to impact people's lives, to being director of coaching for a professional club in Cambodia, head coach and head of women's football for the Grenada FA and CONCACAF, technical director and coach in many top-level youth academies within Africa, and a manager of a professional club in Rwanda. And so, Harry, now from Kinshasa, we welcome you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. And I know that today had some surprise and things for you, so we appreciate you being quick to adapt and being flexible. You're calling in from an internet cafe in Kinshasa, and so we appreciate your dedication to making this happen.
No, I really wanted to be on the pod, so anything it takes, no?
Perfect. And that seems like it's definitely been a mantra for you, right? So, starting out in Leeds, what was kind of your earlier experience of the game, as a player and just like culturally? We know that if anyone's seen the documentary series on Leeds United, what a huge cultural role that football plays, in Yorkshire and in that part of the world. So tell us a little bit about your earlier time with the game.
Yeah, I mean, the culture of football in Leeds is so strong. It's similar to Newcastle in that it's a one-club city. And so everything based around the highs and lows of the city is football. Growing up, we had the period of time with the Champions League where we had the likes of Mark Viduka and big names like Rio Ferdinand and these guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a wave of enthusiasm and the whole city was buzzing, and then it came crashing down, unfortunately. So yeah, it's a big part of my life, and yeah, it kind of shaped the journey that I've been on, really. And always grateful for the opportunities that have come out of just kind of those early beginnings.
Yeah, I think if you look at Leeds, if we make a quick connection personally, with me being American in the United States, obviously recently Leeds having likes of Tyler Adams and Brendan Aronson, who's a local youth product of our local club, the Philadelphia Union. We call him our Medford Messi because he's from Medford, New Jersey.
Okay.
And so I know that they were a part of the club recently. Unfortunately, couldn't help them stay up, but I'm sure, one thing that strikes me about Leeds is like you look at the more distant past, of 60s and 70s being a juggernaut of English football, and then the 90s again and early 2000s, and then down. It seems like it might go down, but there's nothing keeping you guys from coming back up. So it's just a matter of time until we see you back in the Prem.
It's a huge club, yeah. It's a huge club. Maybe sometimes the governance of the club and the organization has not supported them being at the level they should be. But I think especially Tyler Adams really caught the feeling of the community. His style of play, his scrappiness, his kind of will to win, really ingratiated him to the Leeds people. And I think out of the American boys that were there, he's the one that really kind of stole the hearts of the fans.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's something that we see too. We saw it in the World Cup and his performances with the U.S. national team. He's definitely a core of the team and will be a leader in the years going forward. So you grew up as a Leeds supporter. What kind of got you to face that urge to maybe go abroad to experience something a little bit different than what you're used to in your hometown?
So, I mean, I'm somebody that enjoy doing a bunch of different things. What came out at the beginning was the opportunity, just as I finished university, to go to America. So I did the kind of soccer camps. I worked with UK International Soccer. and got a taste for it. And really from there, it was just opportunity after opportunity. And the chance to grow personally off the field, to experience different cultures, and to see how football is around the world has just been, yeah, I mean, it's been amazing. And I've had so many offers to go to places that I always wanted to travel to that it was impossible to say no. So I think for me, combining both, and you talked before about the NGO side of my career, there is an element of working in some of the environments that I've been in where I believe you're having more impact than I would be if I was working in the UK.
Sure.
The players that we're working with, football can have so much more benefit to them, and can really be a life-changing opportunity. And that obviously brings an extra level of reward to the day-to-day work.
Absolutely. And I think that's one amazing thing that the game of football offers is, like, yes, you have your more, we could call it a little bit more mainstream of professional clubs and professional academies in more established developed countries. But then you can have people, just average people in the community, and have the game as a way to unify them, right? So, between your experiences at a professional level, right, in a professional setting, in a national team setting, what is it that kind of like keeps, it unifies all those different situations and all those different experiences in your head? Like, what's a common thread that runs through all the various roles, positions, and places, where you've been a part of the game?
Look, I think what happens with a lot of kids is that maybe the school, the academic environment doesn't suit them. I think every child wants to feel competent, they want to feel like they can contribute, and they have something to give. And I feel like football, whether you're playing at the elite level, whether you're academy or grassroots, it gives kids the opportunity to do that, to be part of a community of people that love the same thing. And once they grasp the basics, then they start to feel like they're part of that community, and that they have something to offer. And I think that's one of the things that worries me, I would say, in the direction that the general game is going, is that we're really starting to atomize footballers and to take away a lot of the humanity from players. I mean, I think sports science and those elements of the game are really important. But if we only analyze players in terms of data, we're losing that really important thing that starts when they're very young, starts with a passion that I had playing, you had playing. You have to keep that. Like, if you're asking people to pursue a career, I mean, the reason I do my career is because every day I get joy from it. I love it. And it worries me when I hear professional football players and they're becoming disenfranchised with the game, and feeling like it's not got the joy anymore. And we all envy footballers because we think it's a dream job, no? And so it should be. And I think coaches need to keep that in mind, that the joy is going to create a performance in the end.
I think that speaks to your philosophy, right? And I agree. Like, there's definitely a lot of benefits to be taken from the new analytics side, and all of the, whether it's of the opposition, of your own players. We see now all that in the top leagues, even the US. We see the players are wearing the GPS trackers and everything. But I was speaking to one of our previous guests, Steve Darby, who has coached, all over Southeast Asia and Australia. And I said, Coach, like, what do players need to really make it? And he said the main thing is, like, not giving up on the dream, right? Like, having that dream in mind, because there's so many setbacks or so many things. So with that in mind, and in your perspective of that, and especially in your role in Africa, like, you're probably not in a lot of situations where they have the infrastructure to have a lot of the data. Like, what kind of makes a player stick out to you, and what are you looking for within your scouting role?
I think it can be said about Africa, but I would say in general, when I'm scouting in Africa, there are infrastructural conditions that I have to take into account, and the tactical side of the game is often not so developed here. But I would say generally, when I'm looking at a player, I'm looking at them as a character. Are they somebody that I believe, with all of the off the field challenges that they're going to have to face when they move to a different continent? And I would say, again, a lot of the clubs in Europe, again, as a club, we're one of the better ones, but in general, the clubs don't do enough to support that transition from a lifestyle of a kid who's coming from a village in Congo or wherever. They have to have some of those internal qualities to be able to make it through anyway, despite all of that, despite the fact that a lot of the challenges will mean that they're not viewed in the best light. Initially, they're going to be viewed as having to be much better than a European counterpart. So they've got to be able to step up and take that opportunity. And so when I'm watching games, I'm looking for players who love to be on the ball, players who are trying to do things that are a little bit more difficult, that aren't shying away from the pressure. I mean, we just had a tournament in Goma last week. And that's the region, obviously, with the conflict that's going on, that's really not being touched at all. So it was an amazing opportunity for those players to be seen by myself, and there were scouts from Monaco and other clubs. A lot of them froze. A lot of them found that pressure to be a lot to handle. And it's unfortunate. The event was a great chance for them to experience that, and hopefully down the road they will reflect on it and learn from it. But realistically, if I'm recruiting to the level that I'm recruiting, they've got to be able to step up and enjoy that. They've got to enjoy that pressure and want to take it with both hands.
It's a great point. It sounds very like unforgiving, right? Like it's you get one shot, like the Eminem song, right? You got one shot, one opportunity, right? And you got to take it.
It really is. It really is like that. And whether that should be the case, we can have a conversation. I think there is not enough focus put on how the clubs take care of players and how much they safeguard their investments. That's all true. But realistically, when I'm making a decision about a player from Africa, I want to make sure that they're successful so that the door is open for the next ones. Because if we take a boy from, say, Congo and he doesn't do well, I know how difficult the conversation is the next time. So there's these extra elements of being aware of what the global perspective is, where I want to be at the forefront of increasing opportunities and not limiting them.
Yeah. And so we're talking a little bit about how looking at these opportunities for players, you're going to places that not many other clubs are willing to go. So could you kind of, to give everyone context, like typically if I'm a young player in Ghana, in Uganda, in Rwanda, in Congo, and I have this dream, right? Like, what is my pathway? What would that look like for me to hopefully make it to professional league within my country, and then on a regional level, and then within Europe or something like that, or the Middle East? Now we're seeing a lot of investment there too. Like, what does that pathway look like for a player from the time they're 5-6 years old, and what are their opportunities like?
Well, I mean, it's very complicated, honestly, and this is why a lot of European clubs and scouts from that side don't touch Africa, because it's not as linear, it's not as clear in a hierarchy as you would understand from the European or American side. So honestly, in all of the countries that I've been so far, the idea of a 6-year-old being in any sort of organized environment, there's no chance. Like up until 13, 14, really there's very little structure. And in terms of an actual competition, outside of school football, which in like Uganda, for example, is massive. Schools football is almost as big, if not bigger, than the Premier League there.
Wow.
There you have some structure, but it's maybe a 3-month tournament. In terms of like actual youth competitions, there's very, very few countries where they're doing it regularly. A lot of the big clubs don't have academies. They really don't. So it tends to be individuals who are working with players, and they're playing kind of one-off tournaments and very informal football. Their grounding, their training is coming from street football. And I think it's one of the, if you look at European football, it's becoming overly coached, it's becoming overly tactical, and so the players are losing that side of the game. And that's why there is so much excitement around Africa, because the creativity, all the things that we associate with street football is there. but you then have to go and find it because in terms of showcases and in terms of seeing the players, it becomes very complicated. That's the youth side of it, and then getting them into first team football is even more complicated because of the focus on age here, and the Premier Leagues want guys who are kind of 30 years old, so it takes a long time for the players to get through. There are very many extra challenges for young players to come through, so they end up having to be very, very good to make the level.
So then it sounds like because there's not maybe a lot of organized competitions or like a clear pathway, if I'm really talented and I'm in my little town or village, like how could I get to be seen in front of a bigger club? Would it be a personal connection, like an agent or something like that, creating this opportunity? And then like what would that look like for most players, and how do they kind of get their big break, so to speak?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of very talented players are just lost at the moment. The system is incredibly inefficient, and if we look at the number of top level African players, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Honestly, the amount of incredible talent that just goes missing here is incredible. And so it tends to be a personal connection. It might be a government ministry person who takes an interest, who has the power and the influence to be able to move players. There are some countries where there are good academies. JMG in Ivory Coast and Mali are, for me, the best academy in Africa. Right to Dream are doing a good job. Generation Foot in Senegal. So there are African countries where there is some support in general, but still there are lots of players who aren't getting the support they need. And then it tends to be schools football that will be the launch pad for most of them.
And you mentioned Generation Foot, JMG, Right to Dream. So from my understanding, these are academies that are scouting players within the country, within the region, and then you're putting them into more of a type of residential academic environment. So could you talk about that and maybe your experiences with Right to Dream and other similar academies, and how they kind of operate within that ecosystem for developing players?
So it tends to be that they become residential academies for a number of reasons. A lot of the players that you're dealing with are very malnourished, and unless you have them in full time and you control that element of their development, they aren't going to reach their physical potential at the same rate as players in Europe. I would also say that based on the backgrounds of a lot of the families that you're dealing with, the residential academies with school involved is a big selling point for a parent. They want to know that their kid is getting an education, and it's often something that they're struggling to do themselves. So if an academy can offer that service, that can be as important a selling point as the football. I would say, especially in East Africa, because there are not so many role models and success stories. They are much more interested in you supporting the school side of things than pursuing this dream of professional football. So I think those two elements are very, very important. And then it just becomes that by having them in residentially, you are then able to control more of the schedule for the football, arrange friendlies. Mm-hmm. There aren't tournaments, so if you're trying to do it any other way, then you're having to wait for or try to organize random teams, and having that residential structure allows you to fill in a lot of the gaps that are just so apparent at the moment.
In those situations, with the academies, then is that more they're looking to develop players, and for the professional leagues in their countries? I've seen like Right to Dream, for example, is in recent years sending a lot of players to like preparatory high schools and universities in the United States, and like fantastic schools academically as well, and on scholarships. So for those academies, like what would you say their goal is? Because they don't have professional teams, right? So they're looking to, or in most cases, they're looking to develop. And then what's the end outcome for those players?
Yeah, so I think the models vary. I would say like Generation Foot and JMG are purely trying to develop professional football players. And I would say Generation Foot are really making progress. But if you ask me about the best model for football players, it's JMG by a long way. Right to Dream have a much more global vision. And part of what they want to do is develop great people. So they want the kids to leverage football to be able to get good educations and then come back to try to develop the infrastructure in Ghana. So I would say they have a dual aim, a dual objective. They definitely want to create professional footballers, and you see that they have the club in Denmark, and now they have the franchise in MLS.
Right.
So they really want to expand that direction. But there is and it has always been this focus on having players go out and come back with the skills to build the community, so that it's not just Right to Dream, so that other academies can open in Ghana and the provision can grow like that.
Yeah, because you're even with these academies, the work they've done, and we look at the track record of some of the players now in top European leagues. There's probably close to 10 Right to Dream graduates in MLS right now and in top levels Division One. So they're doing a great job with the players they have, but they're able to serve like 0.00001% of the players that need it, right? Exactly. It's very much a top. And if you look at that type of model, like in the United States, prior to, if we talk about the 90s, early 2000s, we didn't have these national youth leagues. We didn't have youth academies within MLS. So we had like the IMG Academy at Bradenton. We're like, all right, let's take the best 14-year-olds and then the best 16-year-olds. We'll put them all here. And by the time they get to the full national team or an age where they're making professional, maybe you're getting like 10, 25% of those players making it and the rest not, just because all the differences and the changes, right? So you mentioned something as well within a lot of the African professional leagues, like they're looking for older players. So if I'm a really good 18, 19-year-old, but there's no real clear next step for me until I'm maybe 25, 30, like, could you talk about maybe what some of the perspective is from those clubs that are looking for older players? And then as someone who's younger, like, how can they stay active within the game to keep the dream alive, so to speak?
In terms of talking for the perspective of the clubs, I have no idea what they're thinking, and I never will understand why they do it. And I've engaged in endless conversations to try to get an understanding of why and what the reason is. And I've never had an answer that I understood in any sense. So I would say, especially like the kids I had in Uganda are up there with the most talented kids I've ever worked with. And they are still bouncing around trying to find ways to get into first team football. We had, for example, the goalkeeper for the U20 Uganda team, who was like integral in taking them to the final against Ghana a couple of years ago. And he's still waiting on his opportunities at one of the clubs in Uganda. And that's a boy that, if I had to stake all my wealth on, to play in Europe. He's the best goalkeeper I've ever worked with. So it's very, very complicated, and a lot of them are beginning to get very frustrated and hopeless. And that is why the talent starts to dissipate. There's another boy that we sent to Europe and had real interest, and he's been playing in the second division for 2-3 years, and he's ready to give up. And for me, that's a big part of the reason that I've taken on this role, because I saw that we had the talent development side, but we didn't have the exit strategy. And so I want to make sure that I'm covering both sides, because I think as much as the talent development side, in terms of like the residential academy we had in Uganda, is important, without exit pathways, it really hasn't done much for those players. They've ended up just being very talented and frustrated.
So it sounds like, obviously, we've got so much talent just not even being formally developed, not being given opportunities. And then even when it is there, there's not like the clear channels to to opportunities within Europe. And so obviously that's where your role comes in now with Ghent. And from a quick research of their Wikipedia, again, we talked earlier that some of it might not be accurate, so I'm hoping this one is. So apparently Ghent actually had the first African player in 1957 in Belgian competition, a man named Leon Makuna. So it's kind of interesting that thread maybe carries on to today. And again, if someone can fact check me, go for it. But I'm going to trust that stat there. So what do you think is informing the approach of Ghent? You mentioned Monaco. There's only a handful of clubs really going to the hard to reach places like yourself. It sounds like maybe you're going to some top flight divisions, but it's hearing of a tournament here and there. And what makes it worthwhile to take that risk?
So I think, yeah, you're right that Ghent have a long history of like players at the club who from Africa who are legends, and so there is a culture at the club of really enjoying the football of African players and wanting them to succeed. I would say that the recent success of Gift Orban in particular, who's a guy who was playing in the Togo third division, he was bouncing around like many of the players that I've just discussed. And then he attended a showcase, and within 6 months or 6 to 8 months, he'd gone from Norway to Ghent, and now he's being talked about as one of the top strikers in the world. And I think that really crystallized a lot of the previous affection that they had for some of the older players, and especially with the team of people who are at Ghent at the moment, led them to believe that we can do much more. And by bringing in someone like me who has experience on the ground, I can start to build the network across the continent to help people like Gift and the many others who are waiting to have that opportunity. And I think that's really the crucial thing. Some of the leagues in Africa where you can watch videos, and we do that as a club. But I know as someone who's here day to day, that's only a small fraction of the football that's going on. And so we can then start to make sure that our kind of coverage is as comprehensive as it can.
Yeah. And I know as we were leading up to this interview, one of the things that you mentioned is and wanted to talk about is that like desire to go where others wouldn't, right? And that intensity, that passion to push on. And so like with that, there's obviously a lot of opportunity within football in Africa, and this is conversations I've had with other guests too, whether it's Africa, Southeast Asia, even within Europe, right? You have so many people who do want to do things that help support, but then there's so many nefarious people as well, right? We hear unfortunately a terrible trend in the footballing world is agents who are charging players thousands of dollars, their life savings that their family's taking loans on to say, yes, I'll give you a contract in Europe, in Asia, wherever it is. And they show up after the flight and there's no connection or little to no support. And they're literally just floundering without any money. And now their family's bankrupt. So there's, where there is opportunity, there's also a lot of challenge and risk and interesting characters. So how do you develop that network of more trusted people and kind of feel like, hey, I think I'm on the right track here, and people aren't just taking you to where maybe they have a more vested interest but actually isn't maybe where the quality is? How do you kind of vet those people and develop those relationships?
Well, again, I would say that part of the role is for me to be the filter for that, to do that prior to the club's involvement, is to go and have those conversations. I think in general, when you meet people face to face, after a while you start to get an improved instinct for when people are legit and when they're not. I mean, it's not 100% obviously, but I think one of the big things about Africa is how important family is, and how important relationships are. And so one of the key things for me to look at is how the people that we're dealing with, how their connection is with a player and a family, because through that you start to get an idea of the ones that you can trust and people who are really working for development, and the ones that you say who are in it for the wrong reasons. And it has made everything very complicated. I mean, obviously with the FIFA rules now, players can't move until they're 18. These processes are incredibly arduous, and I understand, and they're important for the protection of young people. But it makes European clubs a little bit more reluctant to take the risk because of everything that's involved. So I hope that will kind of change over the next 10 years. And I hope people like myself and others who start to be on the ground here can begin to show how things should be done properly. But yeah, you're right. It's one of the biggest challenges. I mean, I always say finding good players here is the easiest bit. That's really not difficult at all. Maybe the presentation of the players in the stage that they are now, moving to a European level, takes a little work to get clubs to understand. And yeah, all of that off the field stuff, and a lot of clubs have experienced problems with agents and all sorts of things. So it's not just the players; it goes both ways. So hopefully, yeah, my role is to be the filter to make sure that we're dealing with the right people, so that everybody is getting the best outcome.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, yeah, it sounds like you've definitely got your work cut out for you, but also
For
sounds like
sure,
because
yeah.
it is very much a kind of a trailblazing sort of role. It's not common. You have the opportunity, you have the freedom to kind of do things your own way. So for you, like, what does a day to day look like, right? Like, I know you just mentioned you got to Kinshasa more recently. It's not like your home base. You're just here to do some scouting, and you went to the hotel. Power's out, so you've got to hop down to the internet cafe. So everyone listening or watching you here in the background, I see you're doing well to kind of connect with people who are interested in what the hell is this guy doing here. So we appreciate your focus through that. But what does a day to day look like? Let's say on a day where you're going to a tournament, you're going to a showcase, somewhere for the first time, and what does that experience usually include?
Well, one of the things that I enjoy the most is that no day is the same, and that's really one of the draws for me. But I would say there are a few elements that always are kind of central to what we're doing. So, as I said, we are covering all of the leagues that are available on Y Scout and the different platforms. So, I have a team of analysts who are going through all the video and then recommending players to me. So, I'm part of the process of evaluating those and building plans around that. On the ground, say it's a showcase event, then it can be that I'm just there to observe the players. Maybe if it's like a first team Premier League competition, realistically, I'm just evaluating the players. And there's probably one or two players that have been highlighted already, so I'm going specifically to watch them. Something like the tournament that we just had in Goma, because it's so new, so trailblazing, there are a lot of elements around the field about just giving time to people and trying to build the relationship between the club and them, and also get to understand the culture of the place, how football is, how it has been. Um, I also have 15 years of coaching experience. So sometimes there will be elements of what I do where I'll do clinics and other things if I think they're necessary in forming the bonds that we need in a certain environment, especially at the grassroots level. Um, because a lot of what I try to do when I come is obviously we're looking at players who are kind of 17 to 20 years old. That's our primary area. If I can help to influence the grassroots coaches and the academy coaches who are working at the younger age groups, if that's the case, then that's going to be more beneficial for the next group of players coming through.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'd say that's what a showcase day would look like. I'm also then just in the process of identifying the next location to go to. So while I'm in Kinshasa now, I'm arranging trips to Rwanda and Burundi. So I'm reaching out to different parties and trying to make sure that when I get on the ground that we have the right players, the right ages, all these challenges that can come up with football in Africa, so that my time is well spent when I'm there.
And we have all of the benefits of technology. Like you mentioned, you've got your scouts analyzing players already on the video. Just like we connected through LinkedIn, we've got our phones and the Wi-Fi and the internet and everything. But then there still seems to be, these help everything, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really make that final connection, right? And especially when you're talking about the various different countries and cultures you're going to, that it's like you could have a conversation and maybe, and I've had this experience with other cultures, like people might just say yes to you, even if it's not true, right? Or
Yeah.
people might, paint a picture that isn't, and they're not necessarily doing it intentionally. Could you maybe tell us some of the experiences you've had where things are not exactly as advertised, or things were better than expected, and kind of what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's a daily experience. I think one of the things that took the longest for me to kind of acclimatize to is the fact that everything here is negotiable. And I mean that in every level, whether you're talking about laws, whether it's day to day, everything is a negotiation, and almost everything is relationship based. And so coming from the UK, where we like to queue and we like to do all of these things, there are times where things that you think can't be negotiable still become negotiable, and you have to get your head around that, and you have to find a solution. And I think that is a really good personal challenge for me, because I'm somebody that likes to try and control everything, be ordered, and at some point you just have to surrender to the experience. So when I started the role, we did a trip to the north of Ghana, up to Gambaga, which is kind of a town that's famous for their witch colony. And I was told that was going to be a hotbed for talent. It didn't end up being like that, but at the same time, it was a very interesting experience. And a lot of the time, I find that going to places like that sends a message about the intentions of the project that we're doing. And so I have to kind of be happy with the fact that I don't always see the level of player that I want to, but maybe the impact of the visit can build the foundations. There is a lot of conversation here about talent. If you don't invest in the talent from early enough, it's unlikely that the talent is going to be able to reach the level.
Going to places that most people wouldn't, like, it really sends a sign to those people in those areas that, like, you're for real, right? And you have you're something a little bit different. Hopefully that kind of develops a little bit of trust. Not only are you getting access to them when many others wouldn't, but they're kind of seeing that. And like you said, you're building those foundations that then the second time you go, maybe the first time it's not quite as advertised, but then the second time, it's a stronger relationship. There's more trust gained there. Like they're seeing from you as well. And again, that's just going to take some time, and certainly patience, right? Like all great things take is patience and a determination to have a sustainable view.
Exactly.
You're in all these different environments. You're going country to country, different levels of competition. Like how in your mind are you able to say, like, all right, what this player just did in this match in Uganda, right? Let's use your goalkeeper example, like the save that this goalkeeper just pulled off. How would that transfer to, like, first division Belgium, right? Or Champions League level? Like, how do you say that, oh yeah, what this winger just did and taking on, dribbling two defenders and then, finishing the ball like far post, like, how can you really be sure that could translate, at a level? Because like you said, the tactical level of things, just the speed of play maybe is so different. So like, how do you kind of bridge that gap in your mind when you're looking and how, say, would this player fit at a top level in Belgium, or anywhere else in Europe, like your ultimately is the goal?
For me, it's all about kind of game understanding and decision making. And I would say everywhere I've been in all the continents, the best players don't give the ball away. Like they don't give the ball away. And I think it's been part of the work that I've been trying to do with my team of analysts to understand, like, the level of talent that we're talking about here is crazy high. It's really, really high. So I don't think we have to look that hard. Like, the ones who are really special, they're really special. Like, they just don't give the ball away. They're not in a rush. They're like, I always think about the players that really stood out to me growing up. They always seem to be playing at a different speed to everyone else. They always seem to have more time and space. It's no different here. Yes, the game can be a little bit more chaotic and the pitch might be bad, but they never seem to be flustered. They always are in the right position. They're always relaxed, and they're not in a rush to get rid of the ball. And I would say in general, the leagues here, is a very kind of run and gun style, very physical, very fast. So when a guy or when a player is playing nice and calmly and in a relaxed manner, they stand out by such a long way for that reason. And they are the ones that I say, okay, well, like if they can do it at this speed and on a poor pitch and whatever, when they're going into a training session in Europe, they're going to be fine because they already have the rhythm for it.
What would you say is the biggest difference then between the top level in Uganda or now, in Ghana or the Congo versus, somewhere in Europe? Like, obviously we know about infrastructure and kind of the development and that legacy, but like on the pitch, or like how would you even compare leagues like across Africa, right? Like how one country might compare to other in terms of quality of play, speed of play. Like what are those different like metrics that you're using to compare?
I think you have to, for a lot of the attacking players, you have to understand that the technical level is not going to be as high. I mean, North Africa is different. Is different. So Morocco and Algeria, Egypt, they have much more of a focus on technical players and they give more support. But in sub-Saharan Africa, the technical players don't get the opportunity to play, especially the ones that are slighter frame. So realistically, you are looking at players who are physically very strong and fast, but they probably have not the greatest diet. The coaching here often involves doing 2-hour intensive training sessions the day before a match. So often the games can be kind of sluggish. They may be 40 minutes of really high intensity, but then it starts to taper off. So for me, how I'm looking and how I'm identifying is just the players who are able to think through the game, to deal with that, because those same clever players I'm talking about are still having to do the ridiculous training sessions and they're still putting their body through way too much, but they're smart enough to play the game in a way that doesn't affect them when they're in a match.
Mm-hmm.
I think those would be the elements. Like there are lots of very quick players here, but because of the lack of kind of sports science around it, they often don't have the best running patterns. It's always just raw. It's always like, and that's what we're looking at. Is my preference, I would say, might be slightly different to the club because I'm always going to go for the more technical players. They're the ones that I really like and I'm really looking for, especially when they're technical here, because I know how hard it is to be given an opportunity. Uh, but if they're physically exceptional, and we as a club see that they just need a small bit of work to optimize that, then that can also be a key component for saying let's give them a chance, even if maybe their technical level also needs to be refined to a greater extent.
Mm-hmm. And I find that interesting because this is going to be an ongoing debate forever, and it will change. The importance of each facet will change because football changes. But at least in a lot of like coaching education now, and a lot of the bigger themes is like developing the IQ, right? So obviously now it seems like for many people within the footballing space, like skill you can work with a little bit, but at the end of the day, you kind of have a ceiling when it comes to your technical ability, no matter how hard your work at it. In some areas, physically, there's something you can do there, and obviously the physical aspect is really important. We're seeing with just like the number of athletes in professional football these days, and the need for pressing and just constantly moving at a high speed for a sustained period of time in the highest leagues. And then you talked about like the character, the mental side, which is probably arguably the hardest to change because it's hardest to change individuals' hearts and minds, and that's part of the challenge for you of picking the right characters for that. But then it comes to the IQ, right, and the tactical side. And so, what would you say to someone who might argue, well, that you could have the most technical player, the fastest player, the quickest player, but like if they can't recognize the patterns in the game, if they can't kind of analyze and solve problems at a faster speed of play, like maybe they're only used to playing at a slower pace, what would you say to them? And how would you kind of argue against that thought that no matter how technical they are or physically gifted, if they haven't been developed, if they haven't been within a more formal environment, playing a more like, let's say, quote unquote, like more tactically complex, level? Because this is something we see in the US a lot. Like we have athletes, the technical ability is definitely improving, but I don't know if culturally we've still had like the IQ side and that aspect of it. So what would you say in terms of this, ever raging football debate of what makes a good footballer and what is more malleable in a player?
Well, honestly, I think in the end, if you're talking about the highest level of players, they have to have elements of all. And I think they have to have a strong technical and physical base, but their decision making is the key component. Like you will see so many players here, and we did in the tournament that's just gone by, where on a couple of the days they did really interesting things, and then on the other days they couldn't control the ball, or they just kept giving the ball away constantly under no pressure for no real reason. And I think in the end, if we're talking about the best players, it is just their ability to make decisions at higher speeds. And so when I'm identifying, I'm looking at these players and thinking, as the game gets quicker, as they're being pressed, as they're being asked to do a bunch of different tactical roles, are they going to be able to effectively make decisions? And that is when I'm going to recommend a player. There'll be other players that I'll put forward and say, look, this guy is physically insane. He's got these potentials. If you want to take a chance on him, but for me to give my seal of approval, it has to be on the decision making side of things. It's another challenge of being in this environment because the school system is a rote system. So kids are taught to learn by copying what's on the board, and it's actively encouraged to not ask questions, to not be inquisitive, to just do what you're told. So there has to be a kind of force of will from the child to be different. And when I talked earlier about character, to be a child here that questions an adult is you have to be a very strong-minded child to do that, because there's a good chance you're going to get a beating if you do that. So
Yeah.
that already is telling me that they have something about them that's going to be useful in helping them to step up in a unforgiving environment.
Fantastic point, and that's for those who aren't too familiar with that term, the rote system. Is used in many educational systems around the world. It's pretty much just like the teacher says or the teacher writes on the board and you repeat it, right? It's a lot of memorization, right? It's not much critical thinking. It's very there's no room for like autonomy and kind of expression and imagination and creativity. It's like, this is the answer, so this is the answer you need to spit out to us. And I've actually never really thought of that side, of looking for people who will buck that trend or kind of go against that even from a young age. And I think that's a fantastic point. And so you can kind of see your patterns, and it's the ones who break the patterns that are kind of sticking out to you.
Those are the ones I'm looking for sure. Yeah.
Fantastic. So for anyone who, like myself right now, is thinks they might want to be in your shoes someday or try that and just like experience what you're experiencing, like what does someone need? Because I'm wondering, all right, could Pep do your job, right, with everything that's a part of it? Because it seems like the football knowledge side is certainly a significant portion, but maybe it's like 25-30%, right? Like it seems like there's a lot more. And obviously with your experience coaching in 4 different continents, multiple countries at multiple levels, like you've had enough time getting to know the culture, getting to know how things work in many places. Like, could anyone with just a footballing IQ walk in, or what do you need to be a good scout in general, and specifically in a more challenging, non-traditional environment like you're facing here?
But I think if we're talking about scouting in general, there is a big difference to coaching. You don't get the interaction with the players in anywhere near the same way. It's something that at times I miss. So you have to be comfortable with being sat in the stands, watching a game, not really being kind of center stage. And I feel like there's a big wave of young coaches who want to be the next Pep, and there's a lot of ego involved in that. And I think scouting is probably the most ego-less role in football, or one of them, because you're not a key decision maker. You're the person that makes recommendations, and so you have to be comfortable with that. The schedule is all over the place, so you also have to be someone that's ready to get from one place to the next in a certain period of time, and do it by any means, often not the most comfortable means. And so definitely, I think those are key elements of being a scout, what you need on a personal level. For this role, I think, if you use Pep as an example, then maybe the level of football that you're going to watch is going to frustrate you. It's gonna drive you crazy because there is a lot of sifting through poor quality games and games that are not always easy to watch, and just being patient enough to wait for the one gem that comes through, and the one player that you say, oh wow, this has made it all worth it. And then outside of that, just dealing with the day-to-day challenges and things that, for me, like I said, I find so interesting. They force me out of my comfort zone constantly, and it was something that I identified early in myself, that I can get into my comfort zone way too easily, so I have to throw myself into quite extreme situations to really switch on and feel alive and feel like I'm learning and growing. So I love that, and I don't always love it, but I love what comes out of it at the end. And if I look at the last kind of 10-15 years of coaching, I don't believe I would have made the same growth as a person if I'd stayed in the UK and I just worked in the academy system and I was happy wearing my little tracksuit and slowly moving up the age groups. I wanted to work at all the levels. I mean, I've worked at national team level in the Caribbean. I've worked at elite level. Like, I've seen all the different variations of the game, and I think that's informed my ability as a scout, as a coach, at a much more accelerated rate. I've learned so much more about game because I've had to, and so yeah, I think you have to be very conscious of who you are as a person and whether this role, as exciting as it looks maybe on paper, really fits how you want your day-to-day to be. Because if you're not used to kind of chaos, then a lot of the experiences that you're going to find here are going to be hard to deal with for sure.
I think that's a great answer and gives great insight kind of into particularly in your role, what's important. And yeah, I think looking at your background, just hearing you speak, it seems like something that you obviously are so passionate about, and you can't really have a substitute for that compared to the chaos, the challenges you're seeing. So I guess, talking about the experiences, the relationships and things that the game gives us, like obviously we've talked a lot of kind of relatively surface level about the game in Africa, right? But when we talk about experiences, relationships, like could you share an experience, maybe even just from the past few months in this role, or something that was like, wow, yeah, this is it, and this is what I'm doing it for?
Well, I would say the tournament that's just happened in Goma, in a part of the world that's a travel red zone. Before, everybody was telling me like it's a very dangerous place to go, and there is a civil conflict going on there at the moment. And having been in places like Mexico, where I was there at the height of the cartel violence, and other countries where there's similar kind of warnings and people tell you not to go, I wanted to go and experience it, and I saw that the people that were involved had a real passion for football, and they genuinely wanted to do something to showcase the kids and promote them. So being on the ground there and seeing that it's not as everything is portrayed in the newspapers. So obviously, there are a lot of terrible things happening in that region, and hopefully they can find a resolution quickly. But Goma itself was a really amazing place, and I met incredible people. And so the opportunity for me to go and set an example that you can go to these places, and we shouldn't just forget about people who are in places where there's conflict. That for me is a huge reward, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to support other people who are brave enough to do the work to put those tournaments on.
Like you were saying towards the beginning, of like the impact of the opportunity for a player to go to a professional level, how that can change their life, their family, the life of their community, and you're talking about the people who need it most, right? It's just really unbelievable. I'm curious too, on a little lighter side, of like, all right, so what's a typical match day looking like? If you're going, are you picking up a little snack outside the stadium? Are you getting some like meat on a stick. That for me in Thailand, it would be meat on a stick. Maybe some noodles. Like what's it normally look like around these events? I'm sure you've got to have your food options and maybe some other entertainment and like so. What's it looking like on match day? When you're rolling up to the pitch in Kinshasa or somewhere in Uganda.
Well, yeah. So because it's Africa, there's no set kickoff time. So you get there and then you're gonna enjoy the experience until the game starts. You definitely have meat on a stick. Ghana, especially, they had noodles. Noodles was a big thing. And then yeah. And what I love about this environment is that the football is part of it, but the fan involvement is just as important. So people are enjoying the experience of being out together and dancing and singing, and so that really adds to it. Is you get the full experience, not just, as I said, watching the players.
Well, this has been amazing, Harry. This has been great, and we definitely need to have follow-ups. We definitely need to hear, once the first big signing that you pass along that brings again the title in the Belgian league, and once he makes his Champions League debut, we'll talk to you again, and then you can attach yourself to that legacy. The way that we end each one of these episodes, if you could just finish the sentence, because football ...
Because football, here in Kinshasa right now, and I've traveled around the world and will continue to travel around the world. And because football, I've had experiences that I never believed I could have.
Fantastic. Yeah, just there's a couple wrong turns from Yorkshire that might have gotten you there. But fantastic. So this was awesome, Harry. We're going to link your LinkedIn. So we'll make sure to put that in the description, both on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you guys are listening to us. So again, thank you so much, Harry. We appreciate it. And everybody will see you on the next episode of Because Football. See you then.